Everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series where I take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. This video will be reviewing the player supplement Archetypes of Eberron, designed by Brolley, Imogen, Gingell, and Laura Hirsbrunner for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider using my affiliate links for your DM's Guild shopping, supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. Shoutouts to my platinum patrons, Andrew, Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Nick R, Andy, Chris, Manuel, Basil, Nixie, and Travis. And gold patrons, RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy Nima, Marcos de Vicente, Gilberto, Sean A.K., Cert2B, Adam, Dead Lizard Lounge, Sam, Ross, Limpy Spuds, Jerome, and Fatboys619. Thank you all very much for your support. Now, one does not need to actually play in Eberron to use these archetypes. As it says in the subheading, 31 new subclasses for all 13 classes. That includes the Artificer class, which I believe was officially introduced in the Eberron Rising from the Last War 5th edition book. This is a really fantastic collection of archetypes. Probably one of my favorites in that it's got a large quantity and it's still really good quality. Like, there wasn't a single one that I thought was badly designed or was like thematically uninteresting, and some of them are directly inspired. They're all supposed to be directly, inspired by or thematically tied to Eberron, but some of them are more generic. There's like a field medic fighter, for example, which could obviously be in any setting. Others are very heavily drawn to Eberron and specifically certain aspects of it. For example, I believe there's a Paladin Oath of the Kale Knight, which is somebody who is a champion for the Daughters of Sorcerer, which I believe are this group of night hags. So some of them are very tightly woven into Eberron's lore and culture and locations, while others are a little bit more malleable, but they're all really well done, and we're going to go through some of them. By the way, I cannot get over this freaking cover image. Can we all agree this is just Gillian Anderson? Like, this is Gillian Anderson with the, whatever you call the mismatched eyes, the Catra eyes from She-Ra, and some facial tattoos, which is an awesome character concept right there. Scully as a D&D, Agent Scully as a D&D character, fantastic idea. I can't get that out of my head, and now you all need to have that in your heads as well. Also, very professionally edited, professional layout, beautiful artwork. These are all things that I've come to expect from Eberron, specifically Eberron content on the DM's Guild. But I'm very pleased to see that here. One of the best tables of contents I've seen, which is obviously not only does it provide the page numbers for each individual archetype, but also a little one-sentence description for each of the archetypes, which is very cool and useful to have. But we get artwork on just about every single page. Beautiful layout, font, everything just looks absolutely fantastic. So I was incredibly impressed with the overall presentation. In lieu of me going through every single one of these archetypes, although they are all very good, I'm going to highlight probably just some of my personal favorite ones. The Artificer Disruptor is basically a grenadier. You can craft these blast discs, which act as just grenades you can throw and explode, or you can place them as proximity mines, which detonate, I believe, anywhere in the next 24 hours. I think it lasts until your next long rest. You could actually set up some traps. And what I like about this one and the other one, which is the Crystal Shaper, where you can imbue these crystals, which give you abilities, which is also very cool, is you gain a certain amount per rest cycle that you can use, but you can also expend spell slots to actually create more, which is a really neat idea. So if you want to just go hard into your specific archetype, which I think in these two cases you very much would because they're very fun and cool looking, then you can just be less of a utility wizard as an artificer probably becomes, and just go into, I just want to blow things up with my blast discs all the time, which is exactly what I would want to do because that's freaking awesome. Barbarian Path of the Feral Heart is a good example of one that is maybe closer tied to Eberron specifically because it is designed for shifters, although you don't necessarily have to be a shifter. It's just somebody who wants to become more literally bestial whenever you rage, and like you gain like Wolverine-style claws, which is a really cool concept. There are some that feel like they are a little bit of checking boxes in terms of the kind of things they let you do. There's like a Warlock one, which makes you more of a melee warlock. There's and there's another warlock one where you can replace your charisma stat with intelligence to do things. This barbarian one's kind of an example. The Rage Mage, which is a funny name for it, the Rage Mage, basically makes your barbarian into a spellcaster, which is kind of bizarre, and I wish there was a little bit more interesting rules behind just making them a paladin or ranger style half caster, except with warlock type spells instead of druid and paladin type spell and cleric type spells. And that's basically all this is. That's an example of like the weaker classes in my opinion. They're not bad. I don't think it's badly designed or anything, and I think it can work. They're just, to me, not quite as interesting as the ones that have all these new abilities and features, which are the ones that I really enjoy looking at. Let's see. I think we're going to actually go all the way down to there's a really interesting one in the Druid, the Circle of Civilization, which is an urban Druid, which is bizarre to me because Druid, I feel like, is so intrinsically tied to, nature and nature spellcasting. That's the whole fucking point of a Druid. But this one's, because Eberron is a more civilized, despite it still being a fantasy setting, it still very much has these giant like metropolises. Like Sharn is a huge adventure zone for a lot of adventures and campaigns to take place in Eberron. So you could be a Circle of Civilization and literally have a Druid that is more about looking at nature from a sentient humanoid point of view, that we build these cities and collectivism and all these things. So, but I love that the abilities are like you teleport to different city areas, you can navigate around cities very easily, and at the highest level of your archetype, which for Druid is 14th, you can animate a statue or a building or something, basically just some kind of man-made structure in the city to be this kind of, I don't know, for some reason I'm picturing Ghostbusters 2, although I don't think it's supposed to be that large, but some kind of big statue type creature. Not necessarily something I'd be interested in playing, but I think that's a really interesting idea for a Druid, somebody who specifically is a Druid, but for all these urban locations. Circle of Eberron obviously should be tied closer to Eberron, because it's literally in the name, but in this case it's just you can expend your wild shape to create a summoned bestial creature, which that's something you can actually do, I think, in a lot of these Druid circles. Something the designers thought of is expending wild shapes as a resource that Druids can do in lieu of actually transforming into a creature, which I think is really interesting. So in the case of like the Circle of Storms, you can expend a wild shape to basically turn on your aspect of the storm. You deal extra lightning damage and have advantage on saves against being blinded or deafened. In this case, you can summon a nature's ally. And in the Civilization one, you can expend wild shape to move through. I thought there was a spell that does this too. It's like pass through stone or move through earth or something, where you can kind of teleport around into the world. But I thought that was a cool concept where you can use wild shape as an actual finite resource that's doing it other than, which is something I believe that the actual Circle of the Moon does. You can expend wild shapes to heal yourself, in addition to obviously using it to transform. So I thought that was a neat way to do it. Let's go to the monk one's kind of cool. There's a monk spirit one where you can be possessed by different spirits, and all those spirits have different abilities, so they can give you +1 to damage and to attack and damage, which is kind of boring, but probably one of the most effective ones. Other ones that you have like an Eldritch Blast type attack. Others empower your different social skills depending on the spirits you have. There's an interesting thing that the DM can use to kind of jack with this kind of player is if you're fighting a bunch of ghosts or something and they try to possess you, then you have a special ability as this spiritual monk to take control back over your body, but also like absorb that ghost into your own powers, and that lets you turn your ghost spirit into one of these other effects, and the DM can decide which one depending on what kind of ghost it was, because normally you'd have to wait till a long rest to change your ghosts around. So kind of a cool concept there. The Bone Knight is a classic undead legion paladin. Good luck trying to turn that into a adventuring hero. That always seems like a villain to me, but it's a neat idea. You can cast Animate Dead. You can use your divinity to take control of undead, and it is limited by your level. I think my favorite ability is that when you cast Find Steed, you get a skeletal undead beast, which is awesome. Just a kind of an undead warhorse to ride around on, which is very thematic and cool. The Kale Knight is an example of one that's very, very heavily tied to the lore and history of Eberron, but all of them actually do a pretty good job. And all of these classes, the actual class at the beginning has some really fun flavor text, which is very well written, very similar to what you would see in the player's handbook, where it's kind of the little paragraphs of, examples of this quick character in the middle of a story, and, here's how their class would react. But in addition to that, at the top of each of the subclasses, there's a really informative couple of paragraphs that tell you how this specific archetype fits into Eberron specifically. So, for example, the Bone Knight. Although founders of the Order of Bone Knights were powerful members of the Emerald Claw, they recruited freely from amongst the populace, seeking those with the ability and willpower to control the dead. In post-war Karnath, the surviving Bone Knights are elite emissaries who travel abroad to complete missions that serve the greater glory of Karnath and King Caius III. The only recognized Bone Knight training facilities are located in Karnath, and most come from that grim land. However, the Order of the Emerald Claw pioneered the Order, so a new trainee could crop up anywhere their reach extends. So it gives you a really good idea as a player, especially because, DMs are going to want that kind of information, like, well, how did you come across this, and how can we better tie this into, and hopefully that's that kind of group that wants to create that more RP backbone to actually taking this archetype, this subclass, and these give you really, really good hints and ideas of how that ties into Eberron specifically. Now, if you're not playing an Eberron, obviously you can ignore all this, but I like that the title specifically, Archetypes of Eberron, it is designed for that. So I really like that that's there. There's another example I want to read, which is the Rogue Divine Sniper. This tradition is common in Thrain and other fortresses of the Silver Flame. Its lay worshippers are encouraged to practice archery. The Argentum actively recruits Divine Snipers, both for their potent archery skills and their roguish abilities. The Sholaskar of the Talenta Plains also share deep ties to the Silver Flame, and Divine Snipers are counted among their number. The Death Guard of Aranel holds both deathless and mortal Divine Snipers, empowered by the light of Irian. Kalishtar and Aldurns of the Path of Light refer to Divine Snipers as soul bows, according to them great respect. I probably mispronounced some of those words, but the point is, it does a really cool job of tying all of these archetypes into all those specific details and geographical locations and different factions of Eberron, which is a really, really cool thing to see, even if some of the archetypes themselves feel like they could have just, you could just take this and put it anywhere. The Divine Sniper has to do with, you're exploring the Kyber, which is basically the Underdark of Eberron. They do some really fun things with the light spell. You can light people up and then take a shot, and that means you can get your sneak attack off, which is really cool. And you could easily flavor that as being an Underdark explorer rather than in Kyber. So, ones like that are still pretty malleable, but still really fun. In fact, I really like the Divine Sniper. And the Soul Knife, which is just Psylocke. Like, you can fucking get the manifest the psychokinetic blades as your weapons, which is really cool. Sorcerer Blood Mage is also one of my favorite ones. You can deal damage to yourself in order to gain advantage on attack rolls or impose disadvantage whenever you have something that is a save. And the amount of damage you deal yourself is scaled with the level of the spell you're trying to cast. So 1d6 for first level spell, first or second, 2d6 for third, fourth, or fifth, so on. Eventually you can regain life. You can spend you can also deal damage to gain sorcery points. The coolest thing is at 14th level, once per long rest, you can do a really big melee spell attack, does 8d10 necrotic damage, and if it kills the enemy, they explode and their blood comes out, and you summon a blood elemental that's under your control for a minute. That's fucking awesome. What a cool, signature, high-level class ability. That is amazing. You really don't want to miss on that. You would definitely want to save your inspiration for that ability. But that's just so freaking cool. You just literally draw blood out of them as their body just explodes. Cataclysm Mage is a good example of one that's tied into Eberron, because prophecies, the dragon prophecy and all that are very big aspects of Eberron, so you can tie into that. The Wizard is I think my favorite class here, because it's given the two most interesting subclasses of everybody. One of them is the Cult of the Alienist, which is this ancient book that has all these dark, exotic secrets in it, and it manifests by these really creepy, extra appendages or things that grow on your body physically. So you can gain an eye stalk that gives you either dark vision, or you can expend spell slots to give yourself True Sight, limited time True Sight, depending on the spell slot, which is cool. You can gain this Living Breastplate, which does all these different defensive abilities. You can gain Spell Grubs, which can gain different Warlock spells, or a whole nother limb. Those are just really, really cool ideas That's always part of you, and I believe you can change them on a long rest. Something I really like a lot of these classes, if you can tell, the ones that I'm liking, are the ones that give you new things and things that you can change, so you can tactically decide, every day, depending on what situation you're going to or what you might need, you can change up what you actually need. So I really like adding, anytime a subclass adds that kind of versatility is really fun. And the School of Living Spells is a thing that's in the Mournlands, I believe, from my time reading through Eberron Rising from the Last War. But the Mournlands is actually filled with literally sentient spells floating around. And the School of Living Spells let you create one of your own. So you can create a living cantrip as a familiar. You can then, I believe, cast a spell. You either cast a spell on it, or it casts a spell from your spell school, and then it can transform into a bigger spell that's more powerful depending on the spell slot that you use. And they give you 3 examples: Burning Hands, Lightning Bolt, and Cloud Kill, which you can then change up any of the specific, basically the damage that it does, or the abilities, depending on what kind of spell it is. So there seems like there's really good rules for it. And a lot of these abilities and things, like the blast discs and all that, they front load these in the early levels, and then the higher levels mainly just empower that ability, which I think is a really cool concept for building characters, because let's face it, a lot of people are playing low-level D&D in general. You don't want to wait too long to get your signature abilities for that class either. You want to be able to, I'm going to take this archetype, I want my cool signature thing to happen. So you can still gain new abilities on top of that, but I like the way that all of these things, you pretty much, as soon as you take this subclass, you gain the signature cool thing about it, right at 2nd level or 3rd level, whenever you would take the subclass. And then it's just a question of getting more abilities and empowering that thing further, and maybe getting some other neat goodies on top of that. So that's a really cool, a really good concept that I think it does very, very well in. And I got basically no complaints. It's such a really good, it's just a really, really good supplement. It's got amazing features. Let's go over my pros and cons for Archetypes of Eberron. Pros: 31 new archetypes for all 13 classes. That is a bunch. That's 2 to 3 per class. Pros: many archetypes are heavily infused from Eberron lore, such as the Kale Knight and the Cataclysm Mage. But not all of them, and as I said, you can easily adapt them into any campaign. You don't even have to be adventuring in Eberron to use them. Pros: professional presentation, layout, editing, and artwork. Absolutely phenomenal in that regard. And pros: details on how each archetype fits into Eberron. Even stuff like the, I keep using the poor field medic fighter because it is kind of one of the more generic ones, but even that one fits into where would these, what faction, what country would be employing these kind of soldiers. So that's in there if you want to use it. I think it's really good stuff. Cons: none. This is just an incredibly great supplement with really good subclasses. As I mentioned, I definitely like some more than others. I think there are some that are way more interesting and creative and original, but none of them did I have a specific complaint about or felt like they were not properly balanced or badly designed or even uninteresting. I thought all of them had at least something going for them, even if I personally didn't want to necessarily play that class. So just absolutely thumbs up in that regard. Final verdict: even if you're not adventuring in Eberron, Archetypes of Eberron is an impressive collection of over 30 thematically interesting and mechanically rewarding subclasses. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. You can follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.